On the night she disappeared, her phone was still charging. Her coffee mug was still half full, sitting on the counter gone cold. The television was still on, paused, mid-episode, like she meant to come right back, but she never did. And 11 years later, no one still knows what happened to Mara Whitfield. This is the story of a girl who lived alone, and the apartment that may have taken her. Mara Whitfield was 26 years old, a graphic designer, the kind of person neighbors described, almost too easily, as quiet, but kind. She'd moved into Unit 14 of the Ash Grove Apartments 2 years earlier, a modest brick building on the edge of a mid-sized town, the kind of place where everyone recognized everyone's car, but few people actually knew their neighbors' names. She lived alone by choice. Friends say she liked it that way. Independent, private, the kind of woman who triple-checked her locks, but still left her blinds open at night, because she liked watching the streetlights flicker on. Nothing about Mara's life suggested danger. No enemies, no debts, no frightening ex-boyfriend hiding in the shadows of her past. She talked to her mother every Sunday. She had a standing coffee date with her best friend Lena every Thursday morning at 9 a.m. on Thursday, March 14th. Lena waited for her. Mara never came. That, on its own, wasn't unusual enough to panic over. People get sick. People oversleep. But when Lena texted, no response. When she called, straight to voicemail. By that evening, after 6 hours of silence from a woman who never went more than 30 minutes without checking her phone, Lena called the police. When officers arrived at Unit 14, the door was locked. Not forced, not tampered with. Locked from the inside, the way it would be if Mara had simply gone to bed. They had to get the landlord to let them in. What they found inside would become the central mystery of the case. A scene so undisturbed, so quiet, that for a moment, officers believed she might simply be in the shower or asleep, and that this was all some terrible misunderstanding. But she wasn't there. Her phone sat on the kitchen counter, charging cable still plugged in, battery at 43%. Her car keys hung on the hook by the door, exactly where she always left them. Her car was still in the parking lot outside, untouched. Her purse, wallet, ID, cash, all still inside, sat on the small table by the entrance. The television was on, paused. A true crime documentary, ironically, frozen on a black screen with white subtitles mid-sentence. Her coffee mug sat on the counter, half full, cold. There was no sign of a struggle, no broken glass, no overturned furniture, no blood. It looked less like a crime scene and more like she had simply vanished mid-motion, as if someone had hit pause on her life the same way she'd hit pause on her show. And that's when investigators noticed something strange. The deadbolt. It could only be locked from the inside, with a key, or with someone physically present in the apartment to turn it. There was no possible way, mechanically, for the door to lock itself behind an intruder leaving with Mara. Which meant one of two things. Either Mara let someone in, and that person somehow locked the door behind themselves on the way out without a key. Or Mara never left the building at all. For the first 48 hours, police treated it as a voluntary disappearance, the most common explanation statistically for an adult who vanishes without obvious signs of foul play. They checked her bank accounts. No withdrawals. They checked her social media. No activity, no farewell post, nothing. They checked traffic and security cameras around the building. The apartment complex had exactly one working exterior camera, mounted above the main entrance, facing the parking lot. It captured every car that came and went. It captured the mail carrier. It captured a neighbor walking his dog at 11:47 p.m. It did not capture Mara Whitfield leaving the building. Not once. Not at any point after she returned home from work at 6:12 p.m. on March 13th, which left investigators with an unsettling question. If she didn't leave through the front, how did she leave at all? The Ashgrove Apartments had a rear fire exit, alarmed, supposed to trigger a loud siren if opened. It hadn't gone off that night. No record of it sounding in months. Officers tested it themselves. It worked perfectly. There was no other way out of the building. No window low enough on the ground floor of Unit 14 to climb through without leaving marks, and forensic teams found none. No disturbed dust on the sill. No scuff marks. Nothing. It was as if the apartment itself had simply swallowed her. By day 3, this was no longer a missing persons case being quietly investigated. It was a town-wide mystery, and it was about to get stranger. Detectives began interviewing everyone in the building. 22 units. Most residents had heard nothing unusual. A few mentioned the normal late-night creaks of an old building. One elderly resident in Unit 9 mentioned something investigators initially dismissed and later couldn't stop thinking about. She said that around 1 a.m. on the night Mara disappeared, she heard footsteps in the hallway. Slow, deliberate. Not the rushed pace of someone heading out, but the pace of someone who had nowhere to be. She said the footsteps stopped directly outside her door and stayed there for almost a full minute. Then they continued down the hall toward the stairwell. She didn't look through the peephole. She told detectives with a kind of quiet shame that she had simply been too afraid. The footsteps were never tied to a name. No other resident reported seeing anyone in the hallway. The building had no interior cameras, only the single one outside, watching the parking lot, watching everything except the place where it actually mattered. Then there was the matter of Unit 12, directly across from Mara's apartment. The tenant, a man in his 30s named Daniel Foss, had moved in only 6 weeks before Mara vanished. He was by every account polite, unremarkable. He worked nights at a regional distribution warehouse, which meant his schedule rarely overlapped with hers. Except detectives discovered something troubling buried in the building's maintenance records. 3 weeks before Mara disappeared, Daniel Foss had submitted a maintenance request, claiming his apartment smoke detector was malfunctioning and asking for a master key to check on something, while the building supervisor was unavailable. The supervisor, trying to be helpful, had briefly lent him one, a master key, to every unit in the building. When police went to question Daniel Foss 4 days after Mara was reported missing, his apartment was empty, not packed in a rush, emptied carefully, furniture gone, no forwarding address, no trace. He had vanished too. For a brief, electric moment, the case seemed close to cracking. A man with unexplained access to every apartment in the building. A man who fled days after a young woman went missing. It seemed almost too clean. But almost 2 weeks later, Daniel Foss was located, alive, and very much not in hiding the way investigators assumed. He had moved 3 states away to care for a sick parent, something he later confirmed through hospital records and a flight booked 9 days. Before Mara disappeared. A booking he simply hadn't mentioned to anyone in the building because, in his words, it wasn't anyone's business. His alibi for the night in question held. Security footage placed him at his warehouse job. Badge in and badge out times confirmed. 60 miles away, the entire night. The master key? He admitted to requesting it, but said he'd returned it to the supervisor's mailbox the same week, well before Mara vanished. The supervisor couldn't recall for certain. There was no log of its return. It was Investigators concluded an unfortunate coincidence wrapped in bad timing. A man whose ordinary, explainable choices happened to look exactly like the actions of someone with something to hide. The case went cold for the first time. Not because the mystery was solved, but because the only lead investigators had chased had led nowhere. Mara's mother, in an interview nearly a year later, said something that has haunted true crime communities ever since. "My daughter didn't leave that apartment. I know my daughter. Something or someone was already inside before she even got home that night." Over the following years, 3 competing theories emerged, each compelling, each deeply flawed. Theory 1. She let someone in. Perhaps someone Mara knew and trusted. Someone with no record, no reason to be suspected, convinced her to open the door. This person could have locked the deadbolt on their way out using a spare key Mara had given them, something her closest friends insist she would never have done lightly, but couldn't entirely rule out either. Theory 2. Someone was already inside. The most chilling theory, and the one her mother believed until her own passing 5 years later. That someone had entered the apartment earlier that day, while Mara was at work, and waited. Hidden, perhaps, in a closet or the small utility space behind the water heater investigators only photographed in passing. When Mara came home, paused her show, made her coffee, she was never truly alone. Theory 3. She left somehow undetected. The least popular theory among investigators, but the one that haunted forensic analysts the most. That despite every locked door, every alarmed exit, every camera, Mara found some way out of that building that no one has ever identified. And that she is, perhaps, still out there, choosing, for reasons no one can know, never to come back. None of these theories has ever been confirmed. None has ever been ruled out. There is one piece of evidence that has never made sense to anyone who has studied this case closely, including investigators who worked it for years. When forensic teams processed the apartment, they dusted the deadbolt for fingerprints as standard procedure. They expected to find Mara's prints and possibly the landlord's, who had a record of being let in for repairs months earlier. Instead, they found a third unidentified set of prints, partial, smudged, but usable enough for comparison. These prints did not match Mara, did not match Daniel Foss, did not match the landlord, the building supervisor, or any of Mara's known friends or family who voluntarily gave samples to be ruled out. They were run through every available database. No match then. No match years later, when the case was reopened and the prints were rerun through expanded systems. Whoever touched that lock has never been identified. To this day, that unidentified print remains the single most concrete piece of physical evidence in the entire case, and the single most useless because there is no name, no face, no person to attach it to. Just a print on a lock, belonging to someone who, as far as the evidence shows, was the last person to touch that door before it was found locked from the inside. 11 years later, Mara Whitfield has never been found. Not her body, not a single confirmed sighting, not a financial trace, a phone ping, a flicker of digital activity anywhere in the world. The Ashgrove apartments are still standing. Unit 14 has been rented out several times since, though, according to at least 2 former tenants who later moved out within months, never for very long. One tenant, who lived there briefly 4 years ago, described something in an online forum dedicated to the case, something investigators have neither confirmed nor been able to dismiss. She said that some nights, very late, she would hear the faint sound of a television playing in the apartment, even when hers was switched off. She moved out 6 weeks later. She never said exactly why. The case remains open. The file remains active, if quiet. Mara's mother spent the rest of her life pushing for answers she never received, giving interviews, posting flyers, calling investigators on the anniversary of her daughter's disappearance every single year until her own death. In her final recorded interview, she said this: "Somebody locked that door. Somebody knows what happened in that room. And somewhere, that person is still out there, living their life, while we are still waiting for ours to make sense again." A coffee mug, half full. A television, paused mid-scene. A door, locked from the inside, with no explanation for how. 11 years of silence, one unidentified fingerprint, and a young woman who simply stopped. If you know anything about the disappearance of Mara Whitfield, investigators are still asking the public to come forward, even now, even after all this time. Because somewhere, someone remembers that night. And somewhere, the truth about the girl who lived alone is still waiting to be found. If this story kept you up at night, subscribe for more unsolved cases every week. And if you have a theory about what really happened to Mara, leave it in the comments. Someone, somewhere, might be reading.